Welcome to REI TV. This week we're going to be talking about the very best places to invest in real estate. And for fun bonus, I'm also going to talk about where not to invest. Now, if we're going to talk about the very best markets to invest in, let's start with where not to invest. Your backyard.
No, I'd definitely buy a backyard.
Why would I say such a thing? You would be most comfortable with your personal geography and your surrounding area. What do you think's riskier, investing out of state or in your backyard?
If you don't have the knowledge of out of state, I would say out of state is riskier because you don't have that, I've lived in Salt Lake my whole life, so I know, what properties could be more valuable.
Yeah, do you think out of state investing is scary, difficult, hard? Yeah. What do you think your greatest concern would be?
Well, I don't know the area. I don't know if it's in a good place.
Well, I'm going to tell you right now that the nation is made up of 350 submarkets, and there's bound to be 5 hot, killer, amazing markets out there. And the bottom line is, statistically, your backyard is probably not one of them. And what's that going to do to your ROI and overall experience in real estate? I'll tell you right now that on average, it'll actually cut down your return on investment by 50, 60, or 80%. So where are the very best places to invest? Well, a more important question right now is timing. Because have you ever heard the phrase market bubble, the bubble popped and what happened? Well, think about real estate, how it's going up over time in value, but it doesn't move in this straight line, right? Everything over that line is, we call it a bubble, and bubbles do eventually pop. And the inverse of that is what you'd call a trough, and troughs also pop. We have to come back. Why? Because of inflation and because real estate will always come back to at least what it costs to build a house as long as we're making babies, because it's population driven. Now, think about that bubble for a moment and think about that trough for a moment. In a bubble, I'm using a cash flow strategy, and the purpose is to go into a cash flow market. I want to go to a market that has a really high cap rate. If you're an investor, you know what I mean by that. That means that if I buy a house, I get a mortgage, I take into account all of my expenses and how much cash flow is left, and how does that cash flow relate to the money that I put in, and that gives me a cap rate or helps me understand what my net margin is. Generally, if an investor can find something at 8 or 10%, they're thrilled. I go into markets where I shoot for 13 and 14%, and on my last 1,000 deals, that's what I hit on average. So in a cash flow market, really the focus is on a short-term single-family home rental, going to hold that home for 3 or 5 years in an optimum market like we talked about before, meaning one of those top 5 of 350 submarkets. Similarly, if you find the market crashing and you're in this trough, that's an excellent time to be making money in real estate, because that's where you can actually hone in on markets that have the huge equity play. Hence, I call it an equity growth strategy, because in those markets, I want to go in where they have an overload of auction properties, HUD sales, foreclosures, and there's so many of them happening that we can't get enough investors in there to help clean that economy up. And that's what we do in those markets. Now, right now around the United States, you're always going to have hot cash flow markets and you're always going to have hot growth markets. And personally, I like to have my hand in both, because it's going to depend ultimately on my personal strategy and what market is ultimately going to serve what my really big picture goal is, which really comes down to depending on whether I'm focusing on increasing my net worth or my cash flow. So what then are the very best markets? Well, now that you understand the difference between a cash flow market and an equity growth market, at least currently right now, and by current, I'll usually spend 3, 4, 5 years in each of these markets. For cash flow, I'll go to Memphis, Tennessee. I'll go to Indiana, Indianapolis. Those 2 markets right now give me cap rates of 13, 14% on average, which, as you now know, that's a really high figure. That represents the best in the country. If I'm going for an equity play, I'm in Phoenix, Las Vegas. Right now, Orlando is a huge equity growth market that has just come online. In that market, I can purchase homes so far below the market in terms of their rebuild value. Now, ultimately, the best comes down to your game plan. Do not be one of those investors that doesn't have a plan and just says, hey, I'm going to go from good deal to good deal. Going from house to house is haphazard. You want to have a game plan that says there's a reason for this purchase, and I know exactly how this purchase is going to get me to my goal when it comes to my definition of necessary residual income to achieve financial independence. Finally, make sure that you work with a team that has an infrastructure set up in those markets, because you don't want to go there, hop on a plane, and become an out-of-state investor without having proper infrastructure. Because if you've got bulk on your side, if you've got team and leverage in place, you'll have a chance of really succeeding in the very best markets that are out there. Hey, I just wanted to give a special shout out. I've got Nate Woodbury here from GoWallaby.com. I want to thank you for making this video possible.
Yeah, you bet. Glad to be a part of it.
Friends, go ahead and hit subscribe. Share your thoughts and comments with us. Thanks.